There's not many 360 buildings inside of the Disney park. A 360 building is where the guest has access to the complete building, not having one side that is blocked from the guest experience. In fact, there's only 8 of these that exist inside of Disneyland and not one inside of DCA, because this is a design tactic that Disney got away from, making this building a historic monument in theme park design. And out of the 8 that you can find inside of Disney parks, 1 is technically just a prop, so we can remove that one from the list. Another one, guests can only actually enter in one side even though they can see the other side, making this building not only a Disney design relic, but possibly the most diverse guest building that exists in any Disney park. But only one building has 8 different amenities available to guests, sits technically inside of 2 lands, but has views to 3 other lands. But before we talk about this building, let's talk about why 360 buildings are extremely rare at Disney parks and something that Disney tries to avoid at all costs, and something that they don't really do in any of the new parks whatsoever. The reason why 360 buildings are so incredibly rare is because Disney loves the berm concept. They love to take their buildings and show buildings and push them to the outer perimeter of the park. Therefore, they get to have an access road, private access into the attractions, into the shops and restaurants where they can do their business without interfering with the guests' experience. So Pirates of the Caribbean behind me and the Haunted Mansion are 2 of those buildings that are pushed to the outer edge of the perimeter of the park, giving Disney access to everything that they need to put on a good show. But when Disney builds an attraction like Big Thunder Mountain that has to exist on an island in the middle of the park, they typically will push it up alongside of a building. How the edge of Big Thunder Mountain is pushed up against the Village House restaurant, creating good sight lines and also giving a sound barrier between attractions and other lands, creating sight lines and sound barriers for the guest experience. And then there are buildings like the Main Street train station, which is technically a prop for an attraction and not actually a real building. And what makes the Main Street train station so rare is that it's actually a prop intended to create so many things other than what the building is used for. Yes, it is a train station, but it's also there to create a sight barrier so you can't see into Disneyland, and then when you come in, a perfect sight line. Something Disney uses as a storytelling device to better frame your experience when you come into the park. And coincidentally, my favorite building in the park. I mean, obviously it is a real building, it's a historical landmark, but you get what I'm saying. It is a prop to tell the story. There's not really business being conducted inside of the Main Street train station. But even those prop buildings, like we see at the Main Street train station or over in Toontown, those are incredibly rare. Tomorrowland has one of these buildings, but in typical Tomorrowland, it's the worst one on the list. The Tomorrowland 360 building is home to Astro Blasters, Galactic Grill, Little Green Men, but it has a significant limitation on its western side. Pixie Hollow covers the western side of the building, and also once you get past Pixie Hollow, it's Matterhorn Way, where there's really nothing going on. Or is it Tomorrowland Way? I'm not sure which it is, but this whole side of it is not really accessible. I mean, we can see it. There's no way for guests to experience this side of it. Comment below, does it count or does it not count with Pixie Hollow being there? Because I was really debating whether to put it on the list or not. And another one I debated putting on the list is this island of prop buildings inside of Toontown. Technically, I'm putting it on here, but I don't really think that it qualifies, because even though it is a 360 building, there's really nothing for guests to experience here other than the props on this island of prop buildings. But moving over to a land that has a 360 building that definitely qualifies, Star Wars Galaxy's Edge has the Dock On-Door building that is also home to Savvy's Workshop, the Droid Depot, the Milk Stand, but does have a long stretch of dead space because Disney hasn't decided what to do with the best looking building in Batuu. But this 360 building acts as an island separating Act 2 and 3 of the land, keeping the Resistance area away from the middle section of the land where the locals live and trade in the Black Spire outpost. And then there's Fowler's Harbor, which is a gem of a building. Watch this video to get all of the details on this truly fascinating building that has so much utility and access that it's mind-boggling how much this little shack on the river actually does for Disney operations. And to never be outdone, New Orleans Square has two smaller multi-use buildings like Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, keeping them inside of one land. But unfortunately, due to construction, we can't really explore those. We'll get into a topic about these videos and the French Square later on this year. Good time to subscribe to keep going on these adventures. But the mother of all 360 buildings is this one right behind me. Uniquely, it sits in both Adventureland and Frontierland, but has a view over to the Main Street hub, as well as sitting on the rivers of America. And at one point, it becomes the starting visuals for what will become New Orleans Square. There is no other building in Disneyland that is active in more lands than this building that sits behind me, with a grand total of 7 businesses inside of it and a restroom, making 8 different guest amenities. 4 restaurants, 3 shops, all live inside of this building. When you look at the outer design aesthetic of the Golden Horseshoe, it feels very Western but fancy. But then the Stage Door Cafe stays in that Western motif, but it brings the tone down just a little bit, making it an easy transformation into the first buildings we see of the Belle Terrace, where it starts to have a little bit more of a southern plantation vibe. You see a little bit more design motifs put into the shutters, the brickwork, the doors, the lights. But once we reach the entryway, it feels full on like a southern plantation style building. We love walking around this building, how we go from the Wild West to the Deep South into the edge of New Orleans, just all like that. And then as we go around the bend, you can see similarities between the Haunted Mansion with the lookout tower on top, but as well with the rounded out design, more attention to detail. It feels fancier, it feels more distinctly New Orleans. But then that design steps down and gets a little basic again, going to a couple of basic shapes, small facades, designed purposely to distract your brain, with so many different planes going in different directions, with a patchwork of roof design above. You start to see the invite of the Adventureland aesthetic. And this region up in here is where the storytelling slowly starts to transition over to something way more exotic. Starting out looking kind of Caribbean, with bright colors, but still a traditional building design, and then working its way around into buildings that look like they've been made by locals, carved out of clay, with motifs of storytelling, of natives carved into the sides. And once we're on the other side of Bengal Barbecue, we now see grass rooftops, lots of different carvings inside of the buildings, more rustic materials used all around us. And I love the storytelling, how we just transition in not so many steps from Frontierland over to Adventureland. And behind me is the window for Harper Golf. And it's amazing to think that he did the Jungle Cruise and understood that aesthetic, but also understood how to sell the Western look of the interior of the Golden Horseshoe. Then we work our way around to the Adventureland Bazaar that quite honestly looks like a building we'd be able to find in Galaxy's Edge. It's exotic, it's intentional, but it's pretty simple, and there's a major reason why. One of the fascinating things about the Adventureland Bazaar is it was designed in 6 weeks. Rolly Crump said that he was given 6 weeks to put it together, and they could only use existing supplies out at the Disneyland scrapyard. So most of the things that you see in there are just offcuts of wood, things that they had sitting around after everything else in Disneyland had been built. They had to put together the Adventureland Bazaar. And if you think about it, this building creates amazing Disneyland problem solving, which is something that I'm obsessed with, where they essentially needed to create an island. So when people went into the hub, Adventureland didn't look straight into Frontierland, but also a way to frame the Rivers of America experience where you couldn't just look straight over and see the hub. This island is here to create storytelling from every perspective. And it makes sense it would be one of the last things that they wrapped up, because the real emphasis was put on all of its neighbors on that outer edge that are a part of the Disneyland berm design. The design of this island makes people instantly decide, am I going to the Wild West or am I going for an adventure? And then it transforms into, Am I going to continue along the river, or am I going to New Orleans? We don't see one of these in DCA, and we hardly see them in any Disney parks at all. Epcot has some notable ones, but that's to tell the World's Fair story of Epcot. Disney understood that they needed proper access roads to create a better guest experience, so the island design has sadly gone away, where Disney snakes its lands around, backing up one land against another, creating small paths for operations. As you do a lap around this building, you are doing a lap around Disney design history. And honestly, I don't know another way they could have pulled this off, which makes this truly a unique Disneyland experience. Let's start with the River Belle Terrace, because this building is truly fascinating in the way that it transforms from the Frontierland aesthetic over to being a building on the edge of the rivers of America, and then on its furthest southwest corner, it becomes the visual guide that leads us into New Orleans Square. One facade existing pretty much in 3 different lands, telling 3 different stories. You can also see how the roof structures are at different heights, spinning at different angles, giving guests a puzzle work of decision making on where does this building go, where does it exist, and how many buildings actually is it. But on the far corner of the River Belle Terrace, we can start to see the language of New Orleans Square begin. As this corner, you're no longer standing in Frontierland or Adventureland, you're at the edge of New Orleans Square, steps away from Pirates of the Caribbean, and a whole different story with a whole different adventure. There is an inner courtyard in the middle. But because of Bingo Barbecue, there is a bridge that connects River Belle Terrace over with the Adventureland Bazaar, which is on the back side of the Frontierland shops, which are attached to the Golden Horseshoe, and then coming around on the back side of that is the Stage Door Cafe. The tiny but so important Bingo Barbecue kitchen acts as that bridge connecting River Belle Terrace over to the shops of Adventureland. One of its greatest details is if you look inside of the restaurant, you can see that there are a hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil set of monkeys carved inside of the tree where all of the meats are cooked each and every day. The Adventureland Bazaar, importantly, sits on the corner of Adventureland, framing in the Adventureland experience. And opposite of the Adventureland Bazaar, we have the Pioneer Mercantile, which acts as a transformative shopping experience and pathway into Frontierland. It also shares the exact same footprint with Bonanza Outfitters, which happened to be a Pendleton clothing store from 1955 to 1990, as Pendleton was one of Walt and Lillian's absolute favorite brands. Here, you could buy not Disney merchandise, but Pendleton official merchandise that also happened to have a Disneyland tag sewn inside of it. Video to come about this topic, because I'm so intrigued with the time when all of the stores were owned by different merchants instead of selling Disney merchandise repetitively over and over across the resort. Due to the never-ending construction project, we can't fully appreciate the transformation from Adventureland over to Frontierland in the hub, but they use the restroom as a visual break and then begin the 2 stories on either side. I have always been obsessed with how this building, largely undernoticed, underappreciated by a lot of guests, serves such an important part of the Disneyland visual experience. And I love that sign up there uses the term roundup in a Western connotation, but this building is actually a roundup if you think about it.
Ocean waves to roll, and the stormy winds to blow, and we brave tars go skipping on the deck, while the landlubbers lie down below, below, below. The landlubbers lie down below, below, below. The landlubbers lie down below.
Fantasyland is also home to one of these buildings that hosts 3 attractions, 2 stores, and a restroom, but it does have a couple of interesting twists, making it not quite the guest experience, even though it does have 3 rides inside of it, as the 360 building we discovered today. If you want to learn more about this one, watch this fun video where I show you all the little details of this 360 building that exists in Fantasyland. Brickey here. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for going on this 360 trip with me.